Hello, and welcome to the Get Your Applications Ready for Windows 7 lesson. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about the Application Compatibility Toolkit. You may have heard it called ACT. Within ACT, there's a special tool that we're going to be using called Application Compatibility Manager, or ACM. This is the tool that we're going to use to help find out what kind of software applications, device drivers are running in our environment and which ones are going to work properly on Windows 7, which won't, and try to look at some different reasons as to why we might need to fix applications. We'll talk a little bit about the business needs as to why you need to address application compatibility. Then, I'm going to go into the Application Compatibility Manager, ACM, process. It's a short 3-step process. You're going to like this. It's lots of fun. Then I'll cruise into installation, and there are some required components that need to be there for ACT and ACM. After installation, I'll show you how to collect data and then view and analyze the data. Then, when your applications just cannot or will not run on Windows 7, your last-ditch effort there is going to be XP mode. Applications in Windows 7. You know, with the creation of Vista, all of a sudden we have this great big new architecture that our applications have to run on. So if you're in an XP environment and everything's been working fine for 5, 10, 15 years, okay, that's too many. Everything's been working fine for 2, 4, maybe 6 years now. Well, things are changing. And mainly the changes are due to architecture of the operating system. So applications that ran on Vista, well, they should still run on Windows 7. But applications that ran on XP, because of this new architecture, they may not run on Windows 7. Some of the common problems that you run into are with Vista and Windows 7. When we log on to a machine, we log on as a standard user account. Even if you're logging on as an administrator, you still get that split token. One token is your standard user account. The other token is the administrator token. So the purpose of user account control is to make sure we know as the end user which applications and websites require that special elevated administrator token. And if you think, whoa, wait a second, I was just viewing this page. Why do I have to view it as an administrator? My first thought is going to be Trojan horse. Something under the hood is trying to get installed and it requires the administrator token to get installed. I'm going to mark that website down as do not go back to and be done with it. So UAC does have its place, but the fact that now you're running with a split token and anyone who's not logged on as an administrator is logged on with that limited user access, the LUA. Not everything can be installed as it was in the past. So some issues we might encounter: applications needing to do something that requires an administrative token. And 1, you're logged on as the administrator, so it notifies you. 2, you're not logged on as the administrator, so you'll need to input administrative credentials. Well, how does an application do that? And here's the answer. An application can't do that. So you would have to input the credentials yourself. These are some of the issues that applications are running into on not only Windows 7, but Vista as well. Also, operating system versioning. Well, normally when we go from one OS to another, it changes the major version number. And what I mean by that is, think about NT4. So let's say NT40 workstation. That's version 4. Then we have XP. That can be version 5. Then Vista, version 6. Windows 7. Shouldn't that be version 7? No, not if you want to try to fool applications into thinking it's still running on a Vista machine. It should be 6.1 or 6.2 or 6.3. The point is, the number on the left-hand side of the dot needs to still be version 6. And that's how we can fool some applications into thinking they're still running on an older operating system, is by that OS versioning. So, business needs, you're going to have to test every single application and website to make sure it's going to run properly on Windows 7. And this doesn't mean you're going to open an application, see that it launched, and then close the application. You really need to set up test groups. And these are people who use specific applications every day, all day long so that they get a real chance to go in and click on every button, every menu item, and just find out if this application works 100%. Does it work 95%? Does it work 90%? Maybe there are certain things that you cannot get to run on Windows 7, or just things you need to fix. But the first thing you need to do is make sure that every single application you have, even the homegrown, in-house built applications, are going to run on Windows 7. And to test your applications, you'll use the Application Compatibility Manager, or ACM. The ACM process. Notice, on the left-hand side, I have our ACT database. Yes, ACT is installed on this server. And then on the right-hand side, I have a whole bunch of clients, and I need to figure out, I've got a hodgepodge of clients there. I've got some servers, I've got desktop OSs, I have XP machines, SP2, some are SP3, I have Vista workstations, and I have 2000 Pro workstations. So the first thing I need to do is to collect the data from all of my servers and workstations to find out which applications are important. And it's always surprising, I think, to find out how many applications are running in people's environments that they weren't even aware are still running. So step one is to create a package that can then be sent out to all of your client machines to collect data from them. Then that data is returned back to the ACT database and stored as inventoried information. Step three is you can view and analyze that information, and then you can send it to the ACT community, which is a Microsoft site that's been dedicated to information for application compatibility. Lots of third-party vendors and other organizations other than Microsoft have been storing information in the ACT community. This is going to make our lives easier because if you have an application that's not running properly, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to figure out exactly what those issues are or how to resolve those issues. You can simply send the information up into the ACT community, and then the response will be, oh, that application, you need to put these fixes or shims on that application. And shim is just another word for fixing the application. So as an overview, there are 3 steps. Number 1, collect inventory of what's out there. Number 2, analyze what you found. Categorize it. Is this going to be a corporate application? Is this going to be an application that only gets installed on marketing machines? So you can categorize the applications. Then you can prioritize them. What's the most important application in your environment? Well, for most of us, it's probably email. So email would have a category of number 1, the highest priority. But then you can prioritize all of your other applications as well. When you're analyzing the information, you can manually test the application to see how well it's going to run. You can use the Standard User Analyzer, the SUA tool, to test for user account control issues. And you can also create application fixes. They're called mitigation packages, or shims, using the Compatibility Administrator. But first, you need to install ACT. Installing ACT can be done on a Windows 7, Vista, Vista SP1, XP, SP2, or SP3 workstations, Windows Server 2003 SP2 or 2008 R2. ACT does not support running on Windows 2000 Professional, although it can collect data from a Windows 2000 Professional machine. It's also not supported to run on NT40 servers. Now, ACT requires a database. The supported databases are SQL Server 2008, 2005, and the Express edition of either of those. The database engine that's not supported is SQL Server 2000 or the Microsoft Database Engine, MSDE. You'll also need .NET Framework 3.5 or later, and as far as your hardware is concerned, the ACM client and ACT log processing service servers, which I'll hit that log processing service in just a couple minutes. Your minimum requirement is a 550 megahertz processor and 256 megs of RAM. Microsoft's recommended is a 2.8 gigahertz processor and at least 2 gigs of RAM. The machine you're going to store the ACT client database on, well, that has a minimum requirement of a 1 gigahertz processor and 512 megs of RAM. Let me ask you this. When's the last time you installed SQL Server on a machine that had 512 megs of RAM? We'll be waiting a week and a half for that baby to boot up, right? So the recommended is 2.8 gigahertz processor with 2 gigs of RAM. Guys, I would double, triple that right out of the gate. I would not bring up a SQL Server with only 2 gigs of RAM. RAM's cheap. Your time is worth a lot more money than some small amount of RAM. So I would up that to at least 6, maybe 8 gigs of RAM or higher. Let's take a look at installation. On my member server, if I click the Start button, you'll notice that I already have SQL Server installed, so we don't have to install that. I'll open Windows Explorer, go to my E drive, and in my Act folder, I have the Application Compatibility Toolkit setup. We'll double-click that to launch it. And on the Welcome to the Microsoft Application Compatibility Toolkit 5.6 Setup Wizard page, click Next, accept the license agreement, and click Next. I'm going to accept the default destination folder and click Next. On the Ready to Install Microsoft Application Compatibility Toolkit, click the Install button and let it rip. When completed, click Finish. We can close Windows Explorer and open Application Compatibility Toolkit and Application Compatibility Manager. The first thing we have to run is the Configuration Wizard. And there are 3 important things to know about the Configuration Wizard. Number 1, you'll need to have access to a SQL Server database where you're going to store your application information, and you can tell it the name of the database you'd like to create. You also need to have a shared folder. This is your Act log share, where your clients are going to upload the data that you've requested. And then we have the Act log processing service account. This is the account that takes the uploaded data and displays it to you in Application Compatibility Manager. That account is going to need credentials to run as. So if you have those 3 pieces of information, go ahead and click Next. I'm going to choose Enterprise Configuration. You could choose to view and manage reports only. We need it all, so I'll click Next. And then specify a SQL Server and database. Click on the down arrow and choose Local because SQL is installed on the same machine. I'll click Connect. In the database name, I'm going to input the name of GLB Act for Green Lizard Books Application Compatibility Toolkit Database and click the Create button. It takes just a moment to create the database. Then you can click Next. Configure your log file location. Let's click the Browse button. I'll expand Computer. I'm going to put it on a drive other than my operating system drive. So on the E drive, I'll create a new folder, and I'm just going to call it Act Logs. Click OK. I'm going to allow it to be shared as the same name. Click Next. Configuring that Act Log Processing Service account. I'm going to give it the administrator account with our Swordfish1 password, and the domain is GLB. Then click Next. On the Congratulations page, I'm going to remove the check mark from Send Act Usage Data to Microsoft and automatically check for updates on launch and click Finish. The Application Compatibility Manager is launched automatically, and you're looking at the screen that just gives you an overview as to step 1 is collect inventory information, 2, analyze it, 3, test and mitigate or fix your applications. Step 1, now that we have Act installed, is to collect data. The way we'll do this is create a data collection package. You'll see this called DCP. Now, the way you get that package out to your client machines, well, ACT doesn't have any way to do it itself. So you'll have to deploy that data collection package through a group policy, a logon script, Microsoft Config Manager, or manually get it out there to the client machines. Let's talk a bit about deployment and time zones. So if we have created that data collection package, and let's say you created it on the East Coast, and you set it to start at a specific time. Well, in this scenario, I'm setting my DCP to start at 6:05 p.m., and I want it to run for 5 minutes. When this package is run on a machine that exists in the Pacific Standard Time Zone, it's going to start at 3:05 p.m. If the DCP is run in the Central Standard Time Zone, it'll start at 5:05. This is because ACT uses the Coordinated Universal Time, UTC, instead of the local time. Step 2, inventory the information. Review it. Find out what kind of information you found out there. Now, we've got some special software that runs in that data collection package that gathers this information for you. And those guys are called compatibility evaluators. We have an inventory collector, compatibility evaluator, a user account control. User account control is going to look at issues for UAC and problems with applications running that don't address UAC needs. Then there's the Windows Compatibility Evaluator. This evaluator is going to look at issues on deprecated components. Maybe they don't exist any longer. Also, graphical identification and authentication, or GINA issues, and isolations needed by Session 0 applications. Then there's one more compatibility evaluator, and that's the Update Compatibility Evaluator. And there's a reason I have this guy separate from the other three. Number one, you have to choose what type of data collection package you're going to create. You either create one that does inventory, UAC, and Windows, or you create one that does inventory and update compatibility. Now, the Update Compatibility Evaluator determines the impact of new updates being deployed. And UCE, well, it has some special rules all to itself. And I'm going to get to those in just a few minutes. First, let's take a look at the compatibility evaluators and running a data collection package. On my member server, I still have ACM open. And if you look over at the wonder bars on the left-hand side, I have an Analyze and I have a Collect. We're going to start with the Collect. So if I click the Collect wonder bar, you can see I have data collection packages, and by default, there's none listed. Well, if you just take a second and read the screen, if I double-click in this area, I can add a new data collection package. Let's do that. I'll double-click, and a new package opens up. The name, new_package2. It's not very informative for me, so I'm just going to say test October of 2010. And then the evaluate compatibility. This is where you choose the compatibility evaluators. You can choose to either deploy a new operating system or service pack or apply Windows updates. I'm going to stick with deploy a new operating system or service pack. Click on Advanced. And you'll see by default you have the inventory collected. You can't deselect this. But you also have UAC and the Windows compatibility evaluators enabled by default. At the bottom, you have prompt for restart. You can prompt users to restart if required by the installation for Windows 2000 workstations only. I'm going to accept the defaults and click OK. If you had wanted to create a data collection package for your update services, you would have chosen Apply Windows Updates. Now look at what's in the Advanced button. You've got the inventory collector, and once again, it cannot be deselected, but you also have the Update Compatibility Evaluator. And you also have the prompt for restart, Windows 2000 workstations only. I'm going to click Cancel on this and switch that back over to deploying a new operating system or service pack. In the next box, when to monitor application usage. starting, I'd like for it to start as soon as possible after installation. You can also choose at a specific date and time. How long do you want it to run? Well, I think 3 days might be a really long time, so I'm going to tell it to just run for 5 minutes. Where do you want to put the output that will be collected on the client machines? Well, the output location that we've already set up is on our GLB deploy member server in the Act Logs folder. If you want to change that, you can by clicking the Browse button. And if you'd like to label the collected data that this DCP is going to bring back, you can. I'm going to go ahead and choose to label it just Test October 2010. And notice, my first reaction is 2010 and then go down here to click OK or Done or no. The way that you save your data collection package is the top left corner, the little floppy disk button. I know some of you have probably never even seen floppy disks, but this is the Save button. So I'll tell it to save that. And notice the default where it's going to save these to. It saves them under Libraries and in your default Documents folder. If you'd like to store it someplace else like the desktop, just go ahead and change the path. We've named it what we want. Notice it's going to be an MSI file that gets created, and click Save. Now we've created our very first data collection package. If you'd like to edit it, simply double-click. You'll open the properties back up again and make any changes you'd like. Well, except for the name. If we want to change the name to just be October, we can delete the 2010, click Save, and it says, whoa, hey, wait, we're not quite ready for you to be renaming things. If you're going to change the name of the package, that will cause your changes to be saved to a new package. Do you want to continue with the new package creation? I'll say, yeah, go ahead, create the new package. Put it on the desktop and click Save. Now we have 2 packages. The next step is to actually run the package. Now remember, this is the part where ACM or ACT can't really deploy these. So to get the package out there, let me show you what I mean, the package. To get this sent out to your client machines, this is what you'll send through group policies, logon scripts, config manager, or manually from the client machine, connect to a shared folder on the server where you've created this and download it and run it from there. I'm going to run it on the same server just to generate a little bit of information. So before I run it, I want to show you in Windows Explorer, in the E drive, the Act Logs folder. Nothing there. Nothing exists because a DCP has never been run. If I minimize that, double-click on my DCP, you'll see that it's an MSI, so Windows Installer kicks off. It's preparing to install. Then you can see the Microsoft Act 5.6 Data Collector Installer. Gives us a little message saying, hey, hold on a second, let me get this all configured, set up. The compatibility evaluators are running under the hood, and then they're going to send the data to whatever the shared folder name is on the server that we've given it, which is our GLB deploy server and the Act Logs folder. You don't get any OK. This is going to make it a little bit easier when you're running these in login scripts or through group policies. You don't have to supply a whole lot of switches to it. When it's finished running, let's go back in and look at that Windows Explorer folder. This is our Act Logs folder. Notice now, I've got 3 folders. I have a failed folder, processed, and uncompressed. The failed folder is where you're going to find information about compatibility evaluators that did not run properly on various client machines. You'll get information in here. Under the processed, well, you'll find out which machines ran, and they get this lovely little GUID associated to them to find out which ones have returned XML data. And for us, we have the deploy serve so far. Under uncompressed, that would just show uncompressed files. We don't have any at this point. So I'll close Windows Explorer. Open Application Compatibility Manager. To analyze the data that's been collected, click on the Analyze wonder bar. And first, take a look at the Windows 7 reports. So total computers, 1, have returned inventory information. Total applications, there were 3, and total devices, there were 7. If we go down and highlight applications themselves, we'll see that under the application name, on this server, we have the Microsoft Application Compatibility Toolkit. That's correct. We have VMware Tools and the Windows Automated Installation Kit. You'll see the version of the applications, the company that created them, your assessment after you've created an assessment. In the Send AN, this is information that will be sent to Microsoft. ACT now gives you the ability to remove check marks from information that you don't want to send to Microsoft. So in the past, where it was just send it all or send nothing, now you can pick and choose exactly what information you want sent on to Microsoft. You also have information about vendors, community assessment that's been performed on these software applications, whether they're active, and the last column is the computer or the number of computers that we found this application running on. Under the quick reports, we can highlight application installation packages. We don't have any to report here. Under computers, we have the computer name of Deploy SRV, that's our deployment server. It's running 2008 R2, and it's in the glb.com domain. 3 applications running on it and 7 devices. We take a look at those devices. Under the device report, you can see the model, the name of the device driver, the manufacturer, once again the assessment, which I'll show you in a second, the device class, and how many computers this is running on. Now, I'm not going to go through each one of these because, as you can see, this would be for Windows Vista SP1, SP2, but it's the same information. Applications, application installation packages, computers, and devices. So as you get down, here's information for Vista, and this would give you information about websites that you're connecting to. I'm going to go back up and highlight applications, and then under actions, we can tell it to set the priority. The priority of applications that we have are priority 1, business critical. That's going to be email. Priority 2, it's important. 3 is nice to have. 4, unimportant, and unspecified. Now, these are priorities that you give the applications that have been inventoried in your environment. This has nothing to do with some database where you can prioritize applications. This is how you internally to your organization prioritize your applications. So to set a priority, I'm going to click Cancel on this, highlight an application, and I'm just going to choose Windows Automated Installation Kit, right-click and choose to set a priority. I'm going to choose Priority 1, Business Critical, and click OK. Next, if we would like, we could assign categories. Let's take a look at our categories. We have Software Vendor and Test Complexity. So these are our default categories, and you can always add to them, which I'll show you in a second. So for Software Vendor, is it custom? Is it Microsoft Corporation or third party? Once again, this is you setting the categories to be what you want reflected in your own database. For test complexity, was the test high, medium, or low as far as the complexity of what you tested for that application? If you click the Category List button at the bottom right corner, you'll see that you can add as many categories as you choose. So under Categories, Software Vendor, Test Complexity, let's add a new category of in-house. Then you can create subcategories from that. In-house from marketing department, possibly research and development. When you've added your new category and its subcategories, click OK, and see how you've got a new category listed here that you could choose to categorize your applications with. I'll click OK. Another thing we can set up is the deployment status. The deployment status would be, it has not been reviewed, it's currently in testing, it's under mitigation, it's being mitigated, which means fixed or repaired to a certain point. It's ready to deploy, or you're not going to deploy it. It's in a will not deploy status. Click OK. And the last piece of information is to set, send, and receive status. This is the send to Microsoft or don't send to Microsoft status. So we can tell it, do not send to Microsoft, and click OK. Notice that this changes send, the answer, to Microsoft, changes it to a red X instead of the green check mark. I can right-click that application and choose to set assessment. And notice the assessments that we have. It's either there's no data about this application, or we can say, I've tested it, this definitely works, or it works with some minor issues or has some solutions to it, or it does not work at all. I'm going to go ahead and leave it set to the 32-bit version of Windows Automated Installation Kit works, and click OK. Notice that your assessment shows up in my assessment column. When you're ready, click Send and Receive. This is the information you're going to send to Microsoft: applications, your compatibility assessments, your IP address, and your device list. To review the data before sending, simply click the button and look at the information that's going to be sent to Microsoft. When you're ready, click the Send button. There are a few tasks that it runs through to send the information to Microsoft and then return information to you about applications in your environment. Back on the Applications node, notice now, as you can see, your community assessments are revealed after you've downloaded the information from Microsoft. Step 3 is to analyze and find out, is there anything I need to fix? So, when you ran that DCP, the client automatically connected and stored the data in that logs folder. You can view the data from within the Application Compatibility Manager. And, most of those compatibility evaluators, they just store a little teeny tiny bit of data about each one of the client machines. But there's one that stores about 5 to 6 times the amount of data that all the others combined do. And that's the Update Compatibility Evaluator, or UCE. This guy's a little bit different. First of all, UCE is supported for operating systems Windows 2000, SP4 and Update Rollup 1, XP, SP2 or SP3, Vista, Windows 7, Server 2003 SP1 or SP2, and 2008 R2. Your hardware requirements, 1 gig of free space, and about 256 megs of RAM. This means you're going to have to address UCE and disk space. Now, by default, UCE limits the amount of disk space used to 50% of the available disk space. You can change this amount of disk space used from the Advanced Settings dialog box, which I'll show you in just a minute. But if you end up with way too much data, you can create multiple log folders and shares on different servers. I showed you how to set your own assessment, priorities, categories, but what can you actually do with those? So imagine for a minute that we have 2,000 applications and we've set everything up as to whether it can be deployed or not. We've set our assessment on it. We've prioritized and categorized every single one of those. To get information, click the toggle filter. Then I'm going to tell it we can do and or. I'm going to choose and. I want it to show all information for me that I have set as a priority that's equal to business critical. Now, if you want to choose one of the other priorities that are set, you can, but I'm going to go with business critical. Then right-click and tell it to execute. And notice, the only application I have listed is Windows Automated Installation Kit because that's the only one I've set as a priority 1 of business. And in these fields, you can choose to take a look at any of the deployment status, priority, version, or community assessments that you would like to see a report of right then and there. So this will help you figure out which applications are going to run properly in Windows 7 and which aren't. If not, you can review the community assessment to see why they won't and apply whatever mitigations or fixes to the applications that need to be. The next utility is the Program Compatibility Troubleshooter, or PCT. Now, this guy can help you get those applications up and running that absolutely refuse to run on Windows 7. To open PCT, we're going to start at the Start orb, go into Control Panel, and then we're going to cheat a bit and type in Troubleshooter on the search box. Under Programs, we'll choose Click Run Programs made for previous versions of Windows, and I have an old sample application out there that I can at least walk through and show you how this utility works. This is what PCT looks like. On my Windows 7 brand new machine, I'm going to click Start, open Control Panel. In Control Panel, I'll go up to the Search feature and type in Troubleshooter. Then, when I have a list of options to choose from, I can choose Find and Fix Problems under Troubleshooting. Then, under Programs, there's Run Programs made for previous versions of Windows. Now, notice the little yellow yield sign? I don't have internet connection on this virtual machine, so it's letting me know that right up front. I'm going to click Run Programs made for previous versions of Windows. It opens Program Compatibility. Click Next. I'll browse to the location of the file and double-click the Time Zone Setup, which is an MSI, and click Next. To test the compatibility settings for the program, you'll want to start the program installation first. Open the new running application. And on this message, it lets us know that this file requires .NET Framework and the version, and it offers to install it for us now. Well, we don't have access to the internet, so we're not able to do that, but at least we know what the problem is. Let's take a look at another application. I'm going to click Cancel on this, and we'll relaunch it in just a second. I'll launch the Run Programs made for previous versions of Windows again. Back to the Program Compatibility page, click Next. And we can browse to the game and click Open and Next. We can try the recommended settings, or we can troubleshoot the program based on problems that we've noticed in the past. I'm going to go for Try Recommended Settings to start with and click Start the Program. The game has launched. I'll click I agree. Next. And as you can see, our game has been installed and is running on Windows 7. I'm going to close that and click Next. And then the troubleshooter asks, is it working okay? If so, then yes, save these settings. If it's not, then let's try it again using different settings. And once again, if it's not, you can report problems to Microsoft and check online for a solution. As you can see, our application is running just fine. So we can click Cancel and close Control Panel. The last topic in this lesson is going to be XP mode. Well, first we have to figure out what XP mode is, why we want to use it, and how to use it. Those applications that absolutely refuse to run on Windows 7, maybe they're homegrown applications, and they're not really important, they just handle payroll for your organization, little things like that, where the person who wrote the application might not be with the company any longer, and nobody's currently employed that can edit the application that was written 20 years ago. So, you have an application that refuses to run on Windows 7. ACT can't shim it. PCT can't fix it. But you still have to use the application. So why don't you just let the application think that it's still running on XP? The way you do that is by using XP mode. To use XP mode on a Windows 7 machine, you'll need to download and install 3 different components. The first is the Windows XP mode. Second is Windows 6.1 KB958559. The third is Windows 6.1 KB977206. There are both 32 and 64-bit versions of these files, so make sure you get the right architectural version that you need. And the hardware you put this on is going to require the same type of virtual hardware that Hyper-V needs, but it isn't as picky as Hyper-V. Now, one of the downfalls is there's no drag and drop between VMs. And XP Mode is only going to run on Windows 7 Professional, Ultimate, and Enterprise. The hardware requirements for running XP Mode. The easiest way to figure out if your machine can run this is by going to the Windows XP Mode and Windows Virtual PC Support website. Download their hardware-assisted virtualization detection tool, and it will check to see whether or not that computer can run XP Mode or not. If you get an error that has something to do with hardware-assisted virtualization is disabled, that means the computer supports hardware-assisted virtualization, but you might need to enable hardware-assisted virtualization in your computer's BIOS. And as you're all probably very aware of the fact, each computer's BIOS has different ways to get into it and stores information in different places. So you'll have to find out from your own manufacturer where in the BIOS you need to enable hardware-assisted virtualization. To download those files, Microsoft has made it incredibly easy. In fact, if you just Bing or Google search Windows XP Mode download files, your first or second hit is going to be this page. Notice, Step 1, do you need Windows XP Mode? Well, if you have applications that won't run on Windows 7, the answer is yes, you do. Step 2 is to choose your edition of Windows 7 to the architecture level, and then the language you'd like to install in. Step 3, they made this really simple, I love this site, is first you download and install Windows XP Mode. Second, download and install Windows Virtual PC. And third is an update or a patch, Windows XP Mode Update. When I downloaded these, I left the first one named just the default name. The second one, I put a 2 in front of the name, and the third, I put a 3, just so I wouldn't get confused later on as to which one needs to be installed first, second, and third. And this is what your files will look like. On my Windows 7 virtual machine, we'll go into Windows Explorer. On the root of C, in a folder named XP Mode that I've created, we open that. We'll see here's our first file, Windows XP Mode. The second was the KB I mentioned, and the third was the last KB I mentioned. To install XP Mode, let's start with the first file. And when the Welcome to Setup for Windows XP Mode page appears, click Next. I'll accept the default location for installation and click Next. When setup has completed, click Finish. The second file to install is KB 958559. We'll double-click that guy. When asked if you want to install the following software update, say yes. Accept the license terms. When the installation is complete, you'll need to restart. Click the Restart Now button. When restarted, log back on. Open Windows Explorer. Go back to the root of C into the XP Mode folder and install that third and last update. When prompted to install, click Yes. And when done, you get to restart one more time. After logging back in a second time, you now have XP Mode installed. Let's take a look at the next steps. Now that XP Mode is installed, what you have is an updated version of Virtual PC and a fully licensed version of XP SP3 running as a virtual machine. Now you need to set this up. To set it up, We're going to start with the Start orb, go to All Programs, Windows Virtual PC, and Windows XP mode. Back on our Windows 7 machine, All Programs, Windows Virtual PC, and Windows XP mode. Accept the license terms. Click Next. We'll give it our regular password of Swordfish1, capital S. Tell it to remember the credentials. The username notice is XPM user, and the installation folder is the default that we've accepted earlier. Click Next. Now remember, this is a virtual machine, and this virtual machine doesn't have any malware or antivirus software running on it. So, to help protect this new PC that's coming up, you can choose to do automatic updates or not right now. In a real-world scenario, you're going to want this thing updated on a regular basis. I'm not going to choose to update for now, and click Next. An informational message comes up and lets you know that Setup is going to share the drives in this computer with XP mode, and you can always change that later if you choose. We'll click Start Setup. When XP mode has been set up for the first time, it will automatically launch you into the virtual machine. Once your XP virtual machine is up and running, you can now install applications just as you would your desktop or host machine. To install an application on your XP virtual machine, click the Start button. I'm going to open my computer, and then I'll open the C drive on my Windows 7 host machine, the ColorPick folder. ColorPick is my application I'm going to install, and choose to install ColorPick. On the Welcome page, click Next. Accept the default destination directory. Click Next. Accept the shortcut icons that will be added to the Start menu. And choose to install on the Summary page. ColorPick has installed successfully. We'll click Finish. And I'll close the attempt to access the internet. And the purpose of ColorPick is so that I can drag my icon on top of anything and it gives me the exact color, so I could then mix and match colors to be, a perfect identical match for any picture on any screen that I see. So obviously ColorPick does work, and it is installed now on my XP mode machine. I'll close ColorPick. Later, to launch that same application that you've put on your XP virtual machine, you'll need to open the XP mode virtual machine. We've installed the application, but after that, you can launch it from All Programs, from your Windows Virtual PC, Windows Virtual XP, and Virtual Windows XP applications, and the application's icon will be displayed there. This is what it looks like to launch an application. So now, to launch ColorPick, I can choose ColorPick from the Start menu shortcuts. Notice when I launch ColorPick this time, it doesn't even look like it's running on an XP virtual machine. Under the hood, it knows it's running on an XP machine. And this is how your applications will appear to run as well. It looks like they're running on the Windows 7 desktop machine, but under the hood, completely different story. Those apps truly believe they're running on XP machines. What we covered in this lesson was the Application Compatibility Toolkit. This is the tool that allows you to take a look at which applications are currently running in your environment. This will kind of give you a handle as to how many people are running certain types of software. It's also a good chance for you to find out how many different versions of the same software are running out there. This is a great time, if you have management backing, to bring everybody up to the same version of a piece of software. I showed you the Application Compatibility Manager, good old ACM. I talked a bit about the business need and how you should test applications, and not just by opening and closing the application, but by really getting someone who uses it on a daily basis to sit down and use it for a week, maybe 2 weeks, to make sure that they hit all the functionality that they would normally hit. That's a true test for an application. I walked you through the Application Compatibility Manager, or ACM, process. I talked about installation and the requirements which were SQL databases needed and .NET Framework 3.5 or later. I walked you through collecting data, not only collecting data, but creating a data collection package. Talked a little bit about the fact that it's an MSI file that can be distributed, but not by ACT. You're going to have to distribute that by group policies, logon scripts, manually, or SCCM, good old config manager if you have that guy running. After you've collected the data, I showed you how to view and analyze the data and upload it to Microsoft's ACT community so that you can get a true assessment of your software. If there are issues, you can then find any resolutions that you need. And the last thing we wrapped up with was the Program Compatibility Tool, PCT, and when your applications just cannot or will not run on Windows 7, your last-ditch effort there is going to be XP mode. I walked you through what files you need to download, what you need to install, and the order in which they need to be installed, and then I showed you how to set up XP mode for the first time and install your applications and launch them, revealing that it looks like they're running on that Windows 7 machine, not XP. But under the hood, they think they're running on an XP machine. I hope you've enjoyed the lesson on getting your applications ready for Windows 7.